Okay, so imagine waking up. No alarm. No Slack notification. No passive-aggressive email from your manager that starts with "per my last email." You just wake up when your body decides it is done sleeping. You stretch. You eat a berry. You go touch grass, literally, because grass is right there. And that is it. That is your whole morning meeting. You are free. That was literally just Tuesday for your ancestors. For 99% of human history, there was no 9 to 5. No job. No LinkedIn. No boss asking if you got a chance to look at that. Ancient humans were living what we would today call an absolutely unhinged work-life balance, and they were not even trying. Here's the part that is going to break your brain. Anthropologist Richard Lee did a study in the 1960s on a group called the Dogjuwansi people in southern Africa. Real people, still living the old way, zero corporate involvement. And he found that adults spend about 15 hours a week on survival activities. 15. That is like 2.5 days of work and then absolutely nothing. The rest was naps, vibes, storytelling, staring into the void, and presumably gossiping about whoever ate the last of the berries. You are currently working 40 to 50 hours a week and calling yourself a girl boss or a Sigma male on the internet. They were working 15 hours and actually living. I am not saying anything. I am just saying. And here is where it gets even more unhinged. Because they had what economists call a zero surplus economy. That means they gathered exactly what they needed and then they stopped. No stockpile. No warehouse. No savings account. No assets. Nothing. And because they had nothing, there was nothing for the IHRS to tax. Let that sink in for a second. They were completely, structurally, cosmically untaxable. The IHRS would have shown up to audit them and found a guy eating a root and staring at a cloud, and just turned around and left. There was nothing to take. They had already won. They were the main character, and they did not even know it. Now you might be thinking, okay, but how did anything get done? How did people survive if nobody was hustling? And this is where the gift economy comes in, and it is actually kind of beautiful and also kind of terrifying. In small hunter-gatherer groups, everything was shared. You caught a big animal, you gave it away. Someone else found a berry bush, they gave it away. Nobody hoarded. Nobody screamed about protecting their bag. And the reason nobody hoarded is because of something called Dunbar's number, which is the anthropological discovery that the human brain literally maxes out at about 150 close relationships. 150 besties. That is your entire social universe. Your whole following list. Everyone you actually know. And in a group that small, everyone sees everything. There is no algorithm hiding your behavior. You are caught in 4K every single day by everyone you have ever met. If you were greedy, if you hoarded food, if you refused to share when someone was hungry, the group found out immediately because, again, there are only 150 people, and they are all right there looking at you. And then you got canceled. Not internet canceled, where people make memes about you for a week and then forget. Real canceled. Exiled canceled. Walking alone in the dark, with wolves outside canceled. You got unfollowed by society and then the wolves followed you instead. Sharing was not a virtue. It was a survival mechanic. You shared because the alternative was dying alone in the woods and nobody was going to make a sad video about it. So, everyone shared. Everyone ate. Nobody needed a paycheck because the group was the paycheck. The whole economy was vibes and reciprocity. and the constant low-key threat of wolf-related consequences. It was honestly kind of a WA. And then, about 10,000 years ago, someone had an idea that history professor James C. Scott describes as one of the biggest traps ever set for the human species. And I am going to be honest with you. This guy is not wrong. Someone planted wheat, just stuck some seeds in the ground and waited. And it worked. And everything went absolutely sideways from there, and it never recovered. Here's how farming became the original scam. Once you grow grain, you can feed more people. More people means you need more grain. More grain means more farming. More farming means you cannot leave. You are now a resident. You have a location. You are findable. And grain is the perfect crop for governments to notice because unlike a berry bush in the middle of the forest, a grain field just sits there in the open, measurable, countable, taxable. So what happened? The people with the swords showed up. The early states. They built walls around the farming villages, and they said those walls were for protection. And sure, maybe wolves were still an issue. But those walls also kept the farmers in. You could not just leave. You had a field. You had a harvest coming. You had kids now because more food meant more population, meant more mouths, meant more farming. You were locked in. You were in the subscription service of civilization, and there was no cancel button. James C. Scott wrote a whole book about how the earliest states were essentially grain tax extraction machines with armies attached. The government did not exist to protect you. The government existed because grain made you taxable, and being taxable made you worth protecting just enough to keep farming. You were the content creator. The state was the platform taking its cut. And just like the platform, the state kept changing the algorithm and never explaining why. So, just to recap, for roughly 300,000 years, your ancestors worked 15 hours a week, shared everything, had no bosses, paid zero taxes, had 150 friends who would absolutely fight for them, and spent their evenings telling stories around a fire under actual stars, because there was no light pollution, because there were no cities, because there was no agriculture, because nobody had made the terrible mistake. Then one person planted wheat, and now you owe the IRHRA a form by April 15th, or they will send you a very serious letter. The agricultural revolution was not progress. It was the world's most successful group chat that nobody asked to be added to, and now you cannot leave because you need the Wi-Fi. Your ancestors were not primitive. They were not behind. They were just not delulu enough to think that spending 1/3 of their lives making someone else money was a good idea. They had figured something out that took us 10,000 years to forget. That the point of being alive is not to optimize your productivity. It is to eat something good and talk to people you love, and maybe make something beautiful before the sun goes down. And somewhere in the gap between that life and this one, we built the IRS. Totally normal. Completely fine. No notes,